You're just a war widow milking a pension, what my brother-in-law didn't know before the estate closed. The paper hit the kitchen table with a sound like a slap, and I watched my brother-in-law Cal spread his fingers over it the way a man covers a card he's afraid you'll see. The overhead fixture in that Pensacola kitchen had one dead bulb and one alive, so half his face glowed and half sat in shadow, and the alive half was smiling. "Face it, Rosemary," he said, tapping the forged signature with one blunt nail. "You're just a war widow milking a pension. The house, the accounts, the survivor benefits, that's family money now, and you're not really family." Somewhere behind me, the box fan ticked against its cage, and the room smelled of the lilies people kept sending, that thick funeral sweetness that gets into your throat. Danny had been dead 11 days. Cal was already dividing him up like a carcass. What Cal didn't know, what nobody at that table knew, was that I had spent 31 years being underestimated, and I had learned to keep the sharpest thing I owned tucked flat where no one thought to look. Let me take you back, because the ending only means something if you see how far down the beginning was. I was born Rosemary Kowalski in Bay Minette, Alabama, in a house where the water heater gave out every February. My father repaired outboard motors. My mother took in ironing at $3 a basket and never once let a collar go out with a crease in it. I learned early that respectability was something you built by hand, stitch by stitch, and that nobody was coming to hand it to you. I got my first job at 14, cleaning fish at a dock on Perdido Bay for $1.90 an hour, and I kept a spiral notebook of every check I ever earned. That notebook habit, writing down what was mine, in ink, with a date, turned out to be the most important thing I ever did. I just didn't know it yet. I met Daniel Vance in the summer of 1991 at a 4th of July cookout on Pensacola Beach. He was 23, a hull technician second class, stationed at NAS Pensacola, and he had a laugh you could hear from the seawall. He'd enlisted at 18, done a tour that he only ever described as hot and loud, and come home with a service medal in a little blue box and a habit of standing when older women entered a room. I fell for the standing before I fell for the man. We married in March of 1993 in a chapel that cost us $400 and a case of nerves. Our son Marco was born the following winter, 8 pounds even, screaming like a drill sergeant. Danny stayed Navy for 20 years. That means I stayed Navy too, in all the ways nobody thanks you for. I ran a household on a petty officer's pay across 7 duty stations: Norfolk, San Diego, Rhoda, back to Pensacola twice. I learned to file a claim, dispute a bill, read a contract, and negotiate a lease in a town where I'd landed 48 hours earlier with a toddler on my hip. When Danny deployed, I was the one who kept the lights on and the paperwork straight. And here is the quiet seed of everything that came later. I was the one who kept the records. Every LES, every beneficiary form, every deed, every account statement, I filed them in a fireproof sentry box we bought at a Navy exchange in 1998 for $89. Danny used to joke that if the house burned down, I'd walk out through the flames carrying that gray box and leave him to fend for himself. He wasn't entirely wrong. When Danny retired in 2013, we bought the house on Bayou Texar, a 1,900 square foot brick ranch with a dock that needed work and a mortgage of $211,000. It was the first thing either of us had ever truly owned. Danny hung his flag case in the front hall and set his service medal in the center of it, that dull bronze star on a faded ribbon, and every single morning as he passed it, he touched 2 fingers to the glass. Not a salute, just a touch, like checking that a thing was still true. Cal came into the picture the way weather comes in off the Gulf, slow, then all at once. He was Danny's younger brother, and for years he was just a face at Thanksgiving, a man with a firm handshake and a boat he couldn't afford, and a story about a deal that was always about to close. Cal sold cars, then RVs, then commercial real estate, Then something involving cryptocurrency that he explained loudly and never explained clearly. He had a way of making you feel he was doing you a favor by sitting in your kitchen. And Danny, God love him, could never see it. "That's my baby brother," he'd say. "He just needs a runway." Cal had been given more runways than the airfield at Sherman Field, and he had never once gotten off the ground. The early years were genuinely good, and I won't pretend otherwise, because the good years are what make the theft obscene. Cal came to Marco's high school graduation in 2012 and cried, actual tears, and pressed a $100 bill into the boy's hand. When Danny had his first heart scare in 2016, Cal drove down from Mobile at 2 in the morning and sat in the Baptist Hospital waiting room drinking machine soda until the sun came up. I saw that. I filed it away in the same place I filed everything, because that is who I am. I keep the ledger, the good with the bad. It's why later I could be so precise about exactly where he crossed the line. The wrong notes started small, the way they always do. The first one was a phone call in the spring of 2021. Danny's health was sliding. The heart, then the lungs, the years of shipboard asbestos catching up with him. Cal started calling more, and the calls were never quite about Danny. "You two thought about estate planning?" he asked me once, casual as asking about the weather, "because I know a guy handles this stuff, keeps it in the family, away from the government." I told him we were handled. I did not tell him how handled. He didn't like that answer. I could hear it in the little pause before he changed the subject. The second note came at Christmas of 2022. I found Cal in Danny's study, not looking at anything in particular, which is exactly how a man stands when he's been looking at everything. The gray sentry box was on the desk where I'd left it after updating the beneficiary paperwork that morning. It was closed, but the little brass key, which I keep on a ribbon, was lying 2 inches from where I'd set it. 2 inches. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I notice everything. It's the only inheritance my mother left me. I said nothing. I moved the box that night to the top shelf of the linen closet, behind the beach towels, and I changed nothing on my face. The third note was money, because with Cal, it was always going to be money. In the summer of 2023, he asked Danny for a loan, $22,000 to bridge a closing. Danny, who could not say no to that man, wrote the check off our home equity line. I made Danny do one thing first. I made him write, on the memo line, and in a separate signed note I kept in the box, "Loan to Cal Vance, repay by December 31st, 2023. Cal signed it too, rolling his eyes, calling me the auditor, in a voice that was supposed to be a joke. He never paid $1 of it back. That signed note, with Cal's own handwriting on it, would matter more than either of us imagined. I filed it. Of course I filed it. The fourth note was the cruelest, and I didn't understand it until much later. In the last months, when Danny was in and out of the VA clinic on Pensacola's north side, Cal started showing up as help. He'd offer to handle some of the paperwork so you can rest, Rosemary. He collected mail. He offered to keep copies of everything in a safe place. He asked, more than once, in that gentle grave robber voice, whether Danny had gotten his affairs organized, and whether I even understood all the financial stuff. I let him think I didn't. That was my mistake and my weapon, both. I let Cal build his whole plan on the belief that the war widow couldn't read her own bank statement. Danny died on a Tuesday morning in October 2024. He was 61. He went at home, in the hospital bed we'd set up in the front room so he could see the flag case, and the last thing his hand did before it went still was rise an inch toward the wall where the medal hung. I was holding the other hand. Marco was on a video call from Fort Campbell, 22 years old and in uniform himself now, an Army combat engineer, watching his father go and unable to touch him. I have never heard a sound like the one my son made. I keep it in the ledger, too, that sound, in the place where the worst things live. Now here is the boiling point, and I need you to sit in that kitchen with me because the smell of those lilies is still in my sinuses." 11 days after the funeral, Cal called a family meeting. He held it in our kitchen, my kitchen, as if the venue were already his. He brought a folder. He brought his second wife, Denise, who sat with her hands folded and her eyes on the countertop. And he brought a man in a gray suit he introduced as my attorney, keeps things simple, a soft-handed man named Preston Galt, who never once met my eyes. Cal opened the folder and slid a document across the table. It was a will. It was dated 14 months earlier. It named Cal Vance as executor of Daniel Vance's estate and primary heir to all real property, financial accounts, and federal benefit entitlements. It bore Danny's signature. And it was a forgery, a bad one if you knew Danny's hand the way I knew it, the way you know a voice on the phone. Danny made his capital D like a little sail. This D was a school teacher's loop. My husband had been dead 11 days, and his brother had brought a fake will to my kitchen table. "There's also this," Cal said, and produced a second sheet, a change of beneficiary form for the survivor benefits, the SBP annuity, and the life insurance, redirecting them from me to the estate, which meant, of course, to him. Also signed. Also false. He'd even forged a notary stamp, some cousin of Denise's who owed him. I looked at the papers. I looked at the dead bulb over Cal's head. And Cal leaned back, laced his hands over his belly, and said the thing I will carry to my own grave. "Face it, Rosemary. You're just a war widow milking a pension. This is family money. It should stay with blood. You'll be taken care of, a little something monthly. But the house, the accounts, the benefits, that's mine now. Danny would have wanted his brother to handle it. You're not really equipped for this." Not really equipped. The box fan ticked. Denise stared at the counter, and I felt something in my chest do the strangest thing. It did not break. It clicked. I want to be honest with you about that click, because it is the center of this whole story. I did not cry. I did not scream. I have cried plenty in my life, and I would cry again for Danny for years, but not in that kitchen, not in front of that man. What I felt was the cold, clean settling of a woman who has just realized she is holding a full house, and the man across from her thinks she's folded. I looked at Cal's forged will, and I understood, with total clarity, that he had made one catastrophic assumption. He had assumed there was no real will. He had assumed the records didn't exist, or that I didn't have them, or that I couldn't read them. He had built his entire theft on the belief that the widow was empty-handed. I was not empty-handed. I had a gray fireproof box on the top shelf of the linen closet, behind the beach towels, and I knew exactly what was in it. "You may be right, Cal," I said. My voice was so steady it surprised even me. "I'll need a few days to understand all of it." "Take your time," he said, magnanimous, already standing, already reaching for his keys. "Preston will send over the paperwork for you to sign. Just formalities." I saw them out. I stood on the porch under the light that flickers when the moths hit it, and I waved, actually waved, as Cal's truck backed down my driveway. Then I went inside, took down the gray box, set it on the kitchen table where his forged will had sat 10 minutes before, and I made one phone call. His name was Brody. Brody Ellison, an estate and probate attorney out of a two-man firm on Palafox Street, a man Danny and I had used to draw up our actual documents in 2019. I'd kept his card in the box, of course. He answered on the fourth ring, and I said, "Brody, it's Rosemary Vance. Danny passed 2 weeks ago. His brother just brought a forged will and a forged beneficiary change to my kitchen and told me I'm not equipped to understand my own affairs. I have every original document in front of me. How would you like to spend the next month?" There was a pause. Then Brody said, in a voice with a smile in it, "Rosemary, I would like that very much. Don't sign a single thing. Bring me the box." Here is what I want you to understand about the weeks that followed, because it's the part people rush past when they tell these stories. There was no shouting. There was no confrontation. There was paper and patience and the quiet competence of people who knew exactly what they were doing, while Cal strutted around Pensacola telling everyone he was settling Danny's estate. I brought Brody the box on a Thursday. We laid it all out on his conference table under a fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped wasp. And there it was, in order, in ink, with dates. The real will. Danny's last will and testament, executed on June 14th, 2019, properly witnessed by two people, our neighbor Estelle Prieto and Danny's old chief, a man named Walt, and notarized by a real notary whose commission I could verify. It named me, Rosemary Vance, as sole executor and primary beneficiary of the entire estate. Danny's capital D sat on the signature line like a little sail. The beneficiary designations. The actual SBP Survivor Benefit Plan election, filed with DFAS, naming me. The life insurance, a $100,000 SGLI turned VGLI policy, naming me. The bank accounts, the brokerage account with its $41,000, the deed to the house held as tenants by the entirety, which meant it had passed to me automatically the second Danny died. No will required at all. Cal couldn't have taken the house with a real will, let alone a fake one. He simply didn't know property law, because Cal never knew anything he couldn't shout. And the ledger. Oh, the ledger. My notebooks and files, 31 years of them, the signed loan note for the $22,000 Cal never repaid, in his own hand. The record of exactly when the little brass key had been moved 2 inches. Copies, dates, everything. Brody looked up at me over his glasses and said, "Rosemary, in 26 years of doing this, I have rarely seen a widow walk in with a cleaner file. He picked the wrong woman." "He picked the war widow," I said. He thought that was the same as easy. We did it right, and we did it quietly, which is its own kind of pleasure. Brody explained the shape of it to me in plain words, and I'll give it to you the same way, because you should understand exactly how the trap was built. First, a will has no power until a court validates it. That's probate. Cal had already filed his forged will with the Escambia County Probate Court and petitioned to be named personal representative. The system, at first glance, sided with him. He got there first, he had a document, the court had opened a file with his name on it. To anyone watching, Cal Vance was in charge of Danny's estate. That's the part that would have broken most widows, the official letterhead, the case number, the sense that the machine had already decided. So we didn't argue with the machine. We fed it the truth. Brody filed a competing petition with the real will and moved to have Cal's document examined. We hired a forensic document examiner out of Tampa, a retired FDLE analyst named Yolanda Reyes, who charged us $3,200 and was worth every cent. She compared Cal's forged signatures to 14 genuine samples of Danny's handwriting from across the years. The real will, the loan note, checks, birthday cards. Her report ran 9 pages. Its conclusion, in the flat language of experts, was that the signatures on Cal's will and beneficiary form were not authored by the reference writer, with a confidence she rated at the highest level her scale allowed. The school teacher's loop where the little sail should have been. Then Brody did the thing I loved best. He notified DFAs and the VA directly, with certified copies of the real beneficiary elections. The survivor benefits, the SBP annuity, roughly $2,100 a month for the rest of my life, and the insurance had never actually been in danger because federal beneficiary designations don't care what a state probate court thinks, and they certainly don't care about a will, real or fake. Cal had forged a form to redirect money he was never going to be able to touch. He had committed a felony for nothing. That is the purest picture of the man I can give you. He broke the law incompetently to steal something that federal statute had already, permanently, given to me. And then we found the conscience witness, though truthfully, she found us. Denise called me, Cal's wife, the woman who'd sat in my kitchen staring at the countertop while her husband called me a leech. She called on a Sunday night, and her voice was low and fast, like someone talking from a closet. Rosemary, I can't. I need you to know I didn't know about the will until he'd already done it. He told me Danny wanted it this way. When I saw the date on it, I knew that was a lie, because Danny was in the hospital that week. She was crying. My cousin Ray did the notary stamp. Cal promised him $1,000. I have the texts, Rosemary. I have all of it. I've been married to a liar for 9 years, and I am done being one for him. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, with my socks getting wet on the tile where a towel had slipped, and I let her talk for 40 minutes. I did not gloat. I did not crow. This woman was climbing out of a burning house and reaching back for my hand, and you do not slap a hand like that. Send me the texts, Denise, I said gently, and then go stay with your sister for a while. She did both. By the time the probate hearing came around, the day the court would decide whose will governed Danny's estate, the day before the estate would have otherwise closed under Cal's petition, Brody had a folder that made Cal's kitchen table folder look like a child's drawing. Forensic report, certified federal beneficiary records, the deed showing the house had never been part of any estate to steal, Denise's texts in which Cal Vance discussed paying a man $1,000 to fake a notary stamp, the signed loan note, and the real will with the little sale. I did one more thing before that hearing, and it's the thing I'm most tender about. I called Marco. My son had been trying to fly down for a month, but the Army does not care about your family emergencies on your schedule. He'd finally gotten leave, and when I told him, carefully, flatly, the whole shape of it, what his uncle had done and what I was about to do about it, my son went very quiet on the phone. Then he said, in a voice that sounded so much like his father it stopped my heart, Mom, when we go in there, let me be the one to hand them the papers. Please? I couldn't be there when Dad died. Let me be there for this. I said yes. I said yes because I understood that this boy had been carrying the fact that he'd watched his father die through a phone screen from 400 miles away, and that he needed, more than I needed anything, to stand between his mother and the man who'd tried to rob her. Some reckonings you have to hand to the people who love you. That's not weakness. That's what the whole thing was for. The estate was going to be settled at a family home in Pensacola, not a courtroom as it turned out. Cal, still convinced he was in charge, still oily with confidence, had insisted on a family sit-down to finalize at Danny's mother's old house on Bayou Grande the evening before the formal hearing, so the family could keep it civil and out of court. He thought he was managing the settlement. He thought I'd come to negotiate my little monthly allowance. Brody said, "Let's give him his sit-down." And there was that smile in his voice again. So we came. It was a low brick house with a screened porch and a live oak in the yard, the kind of Florida house where the whole family had eaten Thanksgiving for 40 years. Cal had set himself up at the head of the dining table, like a chairman. Preston Galt, the soft-handed lawyer, was beside him. Two of Danny's cousins sat along one side, uneasy, having been told by Cal that Rosemary's trying to take everything and leave the family with nothing. The system of the family had, at first, sided with him too. He was blood. He was loud. He'd gotten his story out first. I walked in with Brody on one side and my son on the other. Marco was in a pressed shirt, not his uniform, but he stood the way a soldier stands, and I saw two of the cousins sit up straighter. Cal smirked. "Rosemary, glad you came around. Have a seat. Preston's drawn up something fair. You keep your personal things, we'll set you up with $800 a month, and everyone walks away happy." He actually slid a paper toward me. "You just sign here and we can all move on. I know this is over your head, so I'll keep it Uncle Cal." Marco's voice cut across the room like a dropped anchor. He did not raise it. He set his own folder on the table, and he opened it, and he began to lay the pages down one at a time, face up, in front of every person at that table, the way you deal cards to a man who thinks he's already won. "This is my father's real will," Marco said, laying it down. "Executed June 14th, 2019. 2 witnesses. Real notary. It names my mother, Rosemary Vance, as sole executor and sole beneficiary of his entire estate." He set the little sale signature in front of Cal. "You'll notice the D. Dad made it like a sale. Yours doesn't." Cal's smile started to come apart at one corner. "This," Marco said, laying down the next page, "is a forensic report from a retired FDLE document examiner. It concludes the signatures on your will and your beneficiary form were not written by my father. Highest confidence on her scale." Down went page 2. "This is the certified record from DFAS and the VA, showing my mother was always the named beneficiary of the survivor benefit annuity and the insurance. Federal law. A state probate court can't touch it. A forged form definitely can't. You committed a felony to steal money that was never, for 1 second, going to be yours." The porch fan turned overhead. Somewhere a screen door banged in the wind. Cal's face had gone the color of wet cement. "This is the deed to my parents' house on Bayou Texar," Marco went on. "Relentless, gentle, terrible. Held tenants by the entirety. It passed to my mother automatically the moment my father died. It was never part of any estate. You told these people," he nodded at the cousins, "that she was stealing the family house. There was no family house to steal. It was hers before you ever printed your little forgery." Preston Galt was quietly closing his own folder and easing his chair back from the table. Lawyers can smell a sinking ship faster than rats. "And this," Marco said, and his voice finally changed, finally let a low current of the thing under it show, "is a signed note in your handwriting for $22,000 you borrowed from my dying father and never paid back. And these," last page, laid down soft as a blessing, "are text messages provided by your own wife where you arranged to pay her cousin $1,000 to fake the notary stamp on the will you forged. Denise gave them to us, Cal. Your own wife would rather hand my mother the truth than spend one more day carrying your lie." The room was so quiet I could hear the live oak moving outside. Cal stood up too fast. His chair went over backward and hit the floor with a crack. "This is—" his voice cracked in the middle. "Rosemary, come on. Rose, we can work this out. Family to family. We don't need lawyers. I was going to take care of you. You know I was going to take care of you." He was looking at me now, not at Marco, appealing to the war widow because the war widow had always been the soft target. His hands were actually shaking. The man who'd called me not equipped was begging in front of the whole family, and I did not have to say a single word. I let my son answer for me. That was the whole point. Marco stepped one step to the side, one small step, but he put himself squarely between his uncle and his mother, and he did not unclench. "You don't talk to her," he said quietly. "You talk to Mr. Ellison now. The probate hearing's tomorrow at 9. Your will's getting thrown out, you're getting removed as personal representative, and the state attorney's office already has a copy of everything you just saw. My mother's not milking anything, Uncle Cal. She earned every dollar of it over 31 years while you were failing at car lots. Sit down." Cal did not sit down. Cal walked out. He walked out of his own mother's house, past the cousins who now would not look at him, past Preston Galt, who was already on his phone withdrawing as counsel, and the screen door banged behind him one last time. And that was the last time I ever heard my brother-in-law's voice in a room I was standing in. The probate court threw out the forged will the next morning in about the time it takes to boil an egg. Brody presented, the judge read Yolanda Reyes's report and the federal records and the texts, and removed Cal as personal representative on the spot, appointing me, as Danny's real will had directed all along. The estate was settled in my name before it ever closed under Cal's. The house was already mine. The survivor annuity, $2,100 a month, kept landing on the first of every month exactly as Danny had arranged it a decade before. The brokerage account, the insurance, all of it, restored and mine. The state attorney's office in the First Judicial Circuit took Denise's texts and Yolanda's report and opened a case. Cal eventually pled to forgery and uttering a forged instrument and got probation, a felony record, and a bill for the $22,000 he'd owed Danny all along, which the court folded into restitution. He never spent a dollar of Danny's money. He spent quite a lot of his own. I want to end this in the front hall of my house, the house on Bayou Texar, 1,900 square feet, dock finely repaired, mine free and clear. It's a Sunday in the spring of 2026. Marco is home on leave, sitting on my floor with his boots off and his socks soaked because he insisted on hosing down the dock in his good pair, like his father used to. Brody came by for supper because that man became a friend somewhere between the forensic report and the final decree, and he brought a bottle of Prosecco that cost maybe $14, and we drank it out of my mother's good glasses. Denise sent a card. She's back in school now, in Foley, 39 years old and starting over, and I write to her once a month. The porch light still flickers when the moths hit it. Some things you don't fix because they remind you the house is alive. On the wall in the front hall is Danny's flag case, the folded flag inside it in its sharp triangle. For 11 days after he died, it hung there, with an empty space in the center, because I had taken his service medal down and kept it in my pocket all through the probate fight. That dull bronze star on its faded ribbon, worn smooth from 30 years of him touching 2 fingers to it every morning. I carried it into Brody's office and into the courthouse and into that dining room where my son laid down the cards. It rode in my pocket the whole way, warm from my hand, the one thing I would have walked through fire to keep. It reminded me who I was every time Cal tried to tell me I was something less. Marco got up off the floor, wet socks and all, and stood next to me in front of the case. He didn't say anything. He knew. I took the medal out of my pocket for the last time. I opened the little clasp on the flag case, and I set the star back where it belonged, dead center over the folded blue field, and I pressed the pin closed until it caught. My hand didn't shake. A war widow milking a pension. I touched 2 fingers to the glass the way he used to, checking that a thing was still true. Then I pinned my husband's service medal to the flag case, in the house that is mine, and I let go.